Really? This is how we start the show? Hey, it's Dean Blandino, last call. Yeah, whatever. But we're starting the show because Pereira complains to our producer, Bondo, that he's not getting enough love lately. And we have to start with that and make me sick at the start of the show. But anyway, welcome to Good Calls. Mike isn't physically here, but we're going to hear from Mike in a little bit, and he taped some videos for us. We sent a technical crew there. We sent lighting. We sent makeup. We also sent a support animal. Obviously, he needs that. And we're going to talk about, what's the rundown? What are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about Cowboys-Patriots, Tripgate. We're going to talk about Mike's reaction. We're going to talk about DPI in the Saints game and a very ironic replay review in New Orleans. We're going to talk about replay involving Odell Beckham. We're going to talk about, look a little forward to the Browns-Steelers matchup and how officials prepare for that. And also we're going to talk about a pass interference call that negated a Jets touchdown. But let's start in New England with the game of the week. Obviously, Patriots-Cowboys, playoff implications. Ended up being a really close, hard-fought game, but there were two calls, one in particular that had everybody up in arms, and I think we got a tweet setting this up. We don't know if the Cowboys would have driven down the field for a game-winning score, but thanks to a horrible, non-existent tripping call, they won't even get the chance. At Dean Blandino, I hate playing the victim here, but can you please advise on why this flag was thrown? And this was a tripping call on Travis Frederick in the fourth quarter. It negated a third down conversion. The Cowboys were trying to drive and take the lead, and it ended up putting them back 3rd and 11, and they didn't convert on 4th down. And Mike was at the game, so when Mike did comment during the play, let's hear what Mike has to say about it.
Yeah, well, Dean, I'm about as popular in Dallas now as you are in Detroit because of the fact that I defended the call. But tripping by rule is the use of the foot or leg to obstruct an opponent. And I know that Troy thought it was a bad call. Listen, it's not the strongest trip maybe that I've seen, but again, to me, he did lift his legs. They hit knee to knee. It did obstruct the defender. And it was the second time the umpire actually made a tripping call. I wasn't as strong on the first one because I didn't think the first one he intentionally lifted his leg. Here, I think he does. So I still, to this day, after watching it again, I still support the tripping call. The one thing it is not is so many people on Twitter have reacted to say it's a phantom call. It is not a phantom call. The leg is lifted. They do make knee-to-knee contact, and it does obstruct the defender.
Okay, and I would agree with Mike that it's not a phantom call, but I disagree that it's a good call. It's not tripping in my opinion. I thought the first one on Tyron Smith was an incorrect call. I thought the second one on Frederick, I can understand from the umpire's position why it might look like tripping with the leg coming up, but to me, that's not tripping. You want to see an overt act. You want to see the offensive lineman or the offensive player lift his leg to trip the defensive player, and I thought it was more of just where their bodies were positioned and the legs hit and the defender went to the ground. So I understand from the umpire's position, but to me, not a good call. A lot of other people didn't think it was a good call, and I think we have a tweet from Michael Wilbon, who had some things to say to our buddy Pereira. And this might be my favorite tweet of the season so far. If all Mike Pereira is going to do in the Fox booth is make excuses for BS officiating calls, then get him out and put somebody in less interested in covering zebra behinds. I don't want to think about that. That tripping call against Dallas was garbage. Okay, well, a strong sentiment there from Wilbon. We talked about the call. Mike, what's your reaction to Wilbon's comments?
I do have to say that I'm disappointed in Mike's comments. It's obvious to me that, that he doesn't listen to all my work because I do often not agree to what the stripes say, including the first tripping call that was made. And it offends me to a degree that a Mike Wilbon, a guy who I respect and love their show, would actually say something like that if he hasn't seen all the stuff that it's done. It's hilarious that he would say that. And then the NFL says, you never support us. So again, I actually take his text in the same vein that I take everybody else that texts. They always do it as a reaction without total knowledge of what's going on.
All right. Well, we need to make sure that Mike is okay. Can somebody make sure we call him and make sure he's okay for the rest of the day? Because he was obviously offended. Look, in all seriousness, people are emotional, right? And they react to these things. And that's what makes sports in some ways not so great, but in other ways great. And we can all debate these calls. And obviously, you know, I don't want to start like a Wilbon Pereira beef, but it gives me a little bit of joy to see that Pereira was a little offended by that, you know. So let's move on to pass interference and pass interference review. And we had a play in the Panthers Saints game. So imagine in New Orleans late in a game, and there's a no call for defensive pass interference. And now you can review it this year, the Panthers challenge, and they win the challenge. And this was an interesting play. There were a lot of elements to it. And I think we've got a tweet with our Rich Eisen, who really highlighting that irony. The Panthers just asked for a pass interference call via replay and got it in the Superdome using the rule born out of a non-pass interference call in the Superdome. It's interesting, and so we had Coach Payton, who made some comments prior to the game about the process and how those replays are being adjudicated in New York, and then Coach Payton had some comments after the game, and this was Sean's comment after the game. It wasn't our best game. It wasn't their best game, referring to the Panthers, and quite honestly, it wasn't New York's best game. So kind of a shot at New York and the replay process. And look, and Al Riveron, Senior Vice President of Officiating, his comments after the play in terms of when asked by a pool reporter, it was after reviewing it, it was clear and obvious through visual evidence that the defender significantly hinders the receiver while the ball is in the air. Therefore, it's defensive pass interference. Now I'm gonna kick it to Mike. There's Al's comments. I'm gonna kick it to Mike for his reaction, and then I'll react to everything because, as usual, I like to have the final say. So go ahead, Mike.
This one was a surprise to me, Dean. I have to say that, you know, yes, there is a grab. And again, slow motion makes it look like it's so much worse than it actually was. But if you go back and look at this in real time, yeah, there's a quick grab, and yeah, it takes a step away. Would he have gotten there to make the play? I'm not sure. Was it really a catchable pass? To me, there's too many variables to actually put this defensive pass interference on, which, you know, are we starting to see a change in the standard a bit like some people predict? I'm not sure that that's the case, but to me, this was a surprise. And of course, that it happened in New Orleans, and then it went against New Orleans is just part of the big picture. But between the tweets and the comments from Sean and tweets from Eisen, I'm in the camp that says I was really surprised that this was called.
Yeah, and I would think, look, the play in New Orleans, I thought it was pass interference. I thought the defender, it was just beyond a yard. You can't have pass interference unless it's more than a yard beyond the line of scrimmage. It was just beyond a yard. The contact was early. It did take a step away from the receiver. But I think to Mike's point, we have seen non-calls this season that have felt even more obvious that weren't overturned. And I think that's the concern. And it felt like, to me at least, on Sunday, we had a shift of philosophy where we weren't seeing calls, and when the call is not made on the field, we weren't seeing those calls created in replay. And we had 3 on Sunday where the call was overturned. And it felt like a shift that the bar had been lowered. And I don't know if that's going to continue the rest of the season, but it did feel that way from those games. And we had another call it was in the Jets game where we talked about the Jets having a touchdown overturned because of offensive pass interference. And it was a touchdown to Demaryius Thomas. I think the receiver was Brown contacting a defender. And Mike, what was your thoughts on that one?
This is another one, Dean, that really didn't surprise me. I mean, when you get a play that looks like an obvious touchdown like this, you know that in New York, with all these crossing routes, that they're going to be looking for the potential of pass interference, a pick or a block that frees up a receiver running underneath. And I think that's what you had here. And, again, it's interesting seeing that New York is going to get involved with offensive pass interference and defensive pass interference under this rule. But it looks obvious enough to me to be a clear out, which allows that receiver to really be unguarded running underneath. And it's a clear out and a takeaway of a touchdown, not the first time. I remember that we had that in the Philly-Green Bay game early in the season where they called offensive pass interference against Philadelphia on a scoring play. And in replay, they reversed it and gave the touchdown and took away the offensive pass interference that time because the block occurred at the line of scrimmage and not more than a yard downfield. So I think this is the right call.
All right, moving on. We had another pass interference review, and let's read this tweet from the Browns Rally Possum. I didn't know that existed. The @NFL officiating just admitted they missed a defensive pass interference call against @OBJ and changed the ruling on the field. Hashtag Browns, hashtag Cleveland versus Miami. I love the picture there. So this was a pass near the end zone, and OBJ, there's contact early. I want to hear what Mike has to say about this one.
I was less surprised that this one was actually added on because there is the possibility that the arm was pinned down. Beckham's left arm was pinned down. So this one kind of, to me, fell into the category where New York has been. Do you grab the arm and hold an arm down, prohibiting the receiver from getting both hands up to make the catch? That's one of the standards that's in play, and that becomes clear and obvious if it's the case. So, again, I would say we have seen some that have been more egregious, and it has been added on, but this one to me falls into that category as one of the things that New York and Al Riveron is looking at.
Yeah, so I think we could debate whether it was or wasn't pass interference. There's definitely contact, but I do feel like this is a call that, had it happened last week or in prior weeks, it doesn't get overturned. And that's what we talked about, this standard that has seemed to change at times during the season. You look at some of the other plays that have happened this year where calls were not made on the field and they were not added in replay. And this one, to me, didn't feel like it was as obvious as some of those. So again, feels like the standard, the philosophy has shifted, but we'll see how that goes the rest of the way. All right, so let's move on from pass interference and let's go to a matchup that we have coming up with the Browns and the Steelers. And obviously, you have a situation where in their previous game just 2 weeks ago, you had the Mason Rudolph-Myles Garrett thing. Garrett hits Rudolph with his helmet. So how do officials prepare for a game like that? Now, I've been in this position, having to prepare a crew. Mike has. Let's hear Mike's thoughts, and then I'll chime in at the end.
You know, you and I both, Dean, have been around situations like this where something happens in the first game of a rivalry, and then they come back and play each other again. And really what we find out is that nothing happens in the second game. And I think that's going to be the case here. Remember, 33 players ended up with either fines or suspensions. Would I say anything to the referee? Listen, I don't have to say anything to the referee that he doesn't already know. You have to officiate the game the same way, not overreact and start throwing flags immediately anytime there's chirping between the two teams. But again, they got the message that came from the league office. So I think every official is going to be alert, and they will get in between people to keep them apart. But I do not see an overreaction, and I don't think that the officials really need to prepare any differently than they prepare for any other game.
And I would agree with Mike in that the officials know. I mean, they know what happened in the previous game, and what you don't want is you don't want to put the officials on such high alert that they officiate the game differently than they would officiate a normal game. But you do have to just make sure they understand that this is, regardless of what happened in the last game, it's a division matchup. Both teams are really fighting for wild card position. And so you have to make sure that the game doesn't get out of control. You don't have to go above and beyond in terms of telling them, hey, look, last time, we all know what happened last time. But you do have that conversation with the referee, especially that we're not going to let anything get out of hand. Just like you do for every game, officials get scouting videos where they look at different tendencies that the teams have, whether it's offensive formations, whether what they like to do in different situations. And for a divisional matchup like Steelers-Browns, part of that scouting report will be, this is a high-intensity rivalry, and we're not going to let it get out of control. And so you have that conversation in a very general way. So we'll see. We'll look for a great matchup there. That's the show. Hopefully Mike will grace us with his presence next week, and he's not too hurt by Michael Wilbon's comments. And we'll be back next week, and make sure you watch Thursday Night Football on Fox.